Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest Blood Red podcast with me, Ian Doyle. Yeah, back doing me hosting. It's been a while since I've done this. I used to do it in the old days.
In years.
I know, yeah. Joining me, as you can probably tell from his dulcet tones, is our Liverpool correspondent, both home and away. Nearly got that wrong. It's Paul Gorst. Hi, Paul.
Hi. I thought you were going to say Runcorn tones.
No.
That offending insult
Well,
you given this morning.
you are from South Liverpool, so you may as well be from Runcorn. And also, on loan from the Central team, called the Central team because it's got his fingers in everything at the moment, it's Rich Garnett. Hello.
Hello, Ian. How are you doing?
I'm okay, thanks for asking. Paul didn't ask.
Well,
what does that
his
tell you?
reputation precedes him.
It does.
There's only one person I think I see more than you, so I know how you're doing.
Well, that's true, yeah.
Most days.
Well, you know I'm not hungry.
Yeah.
I've just
No,
had
that's
some toast.
good.
Yeah,
You're a bit like Bert and Ernie, really, in a way, aren't you?
Who's who?
Oh, well, you're Bert, obviously. Come on.
Also, explain to many of our viewers, that famous phrase, listeners.
Who Bert and Ernie are. Bert and Ernie were two puppets off Sesame Street.
You've just lost most of our listenership there with that.
Like I said, puppets. We're the Muppets. They're the puppets.
They're Muppets, aren't they? Yeah.
They are puppets.
Yeah.
No strings attached to them.
Well, that was good, but I'll tell you what's even better. NordVPN. So to get the best discounts off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/bloodred. Our link would also give you 4 extra months on their 2-year plan. Did you know that?
I did, yes. Yeah.
There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee, and the link is in the podcast episode description below. But don't look at that yet. Just keep on listening to us. So, no game this week, Paul. No game at the weekend. No game next midweek. No game the weekend after that.
Thanks for listening.
So, funny enough, we're not really going to reflect very much on any of the action at the moment, but we will be looking further ahead to the summer. Now, people might not know this, but it's not that long until the summer transfer window opens because it doesn't really get mentioned very much.
Yeah.
Certainly not by supporters on social media. Bottom line is, are you expecting a big summer for the Mighty Reds?
Yeah, do you know what? A couple of weeks ago, I was almost sort of saying, I think I said it on this pod, that I'm not expecting massive sort of turnover in playing staff. But as it's gone on, I'm not just saying this because they've had a bad week or whatever, but you start to think, you start toting it all up, don't you? And I think me and Theo had this conversation on the way to Man City, and he was sort of saying what he felt needed looking at in the summer, and then before you knew it, you're looking at like 5 or 6, 7 players, which I don't think it's going to be that many, but the more you look at it now, it does feel as though there's possibly the end of this particular team. I know it's relatively new, given that they sort of rebuilt the midfield less than 2 years ago, but there's a lot of players in that squad who've been at Liverpool 7, 8 years, isn't there? You know, Van Dijk, Salah, of course, contracts are up. Andy Robertson, there's big talk over what's going to happen at the left-back situation this summer. Alisson as well, Mamardashvili coming in. So there are loads of little areas dotted about that you think might need a little bit of attention. No more so for me than the number 9. Diogo Jota has been at Liverpool 5 years, hasn't he? Come the summer, come September. Núñez will be 3 at the end of this year. And that's the big glaring issue for me. But everywhere across the pitch, except for maybe midfield, you can sort of look at it and think, that is something that they're going to have to look at. So, yeah, I think just going off that, it probably will be a bigger summer than certainly I thought it was going to be a few weeks ago.
I mean, for want of a better expression, there's been a kind of a stay of execution for a lot of players this season, in the sense that when a manager comes in, he normally goes, right, I'll have a look at the squad in the summer, and then I'll make some changes towards the end of the transfer window because he knows what he likes. But obviously, Arne Slot's had an entire season to do it, and he's got a very good chance of winning the Premier League on the back of it. So I think a lot of these players possibly knew quite well that, as Ghosty said, it's the end for this squad, but it might be the end for them as well. And so they would, having missed out on a couple of titles recently, and they got the one in 2020, and they've come close to a couple of other trophies, that they've just thought, well, this is now our chance, our final chance possibly to win something.
Well, I think expectations have changed, haven't they, over the course of the year, from Jurgen Klopp leaving to a lot of people, myself included, thinking, well, this is the end of an era. A new manager's going to come in. We've no idea how well he's going to do or what he's going to make of this team that needed massive engineering work on its midfield 12 months earlier. And expectations were reset as a result of that. And I think most Reds would have argued that just qualifying for the Champions League this season would have been seen as an acceptable achievement, given all the changes that were happening in the dugout. So the fact that the manager's then got on and lost one Premier League game all season, and looked to be sustaining good runs in the other competitions until it all kind of fell apart recently, has surpassed expectations. So a lot of those players that you may have thought, oh, they'll definitely go, all of a sudden have they've obviously been performing to a certain level across the course of the season. Otherwise, Liverpool wouldn't have been in the position that they're in. And whether there has been certain, a bit of reliance on certain players that has got the job done. I think Arne Slot will know that. But I've kind of flip-flopped on this, to be honest, because I'm with Paul in the sense that obviously you've got 3 players who are going to be out of contract, massive players at the club, and there's still no clarity on whether they're going to be here next year or not. And a lot of what happens around that has surely got to be underpinned by that. And then you look at Jota, you look at Nunes, you look at the left backs, you look at the fringe midfielders who haven't played as much, and all of a sudden you've got like 8-9 players, and you're like, well, this could be a team that potentially, for all intents and purposes, looks like it's going to win the league, and then you're going to literally rip 8-9 players out of it. That sounds insane, doesn't it? It doesn't sound realistic, but at the same time, it could absolutely happen.
I think it probably is a bit unrealistic. When was the last time you saw that many players leave Liverpool? I understand the whole thing about some of the players are getting on a bit. The new manager, this, that, and the other. Richard Hughes obviously has had a year to map out the plans for the recruitment team, and they've been able to put the irons in the fire. They'll have already had their shortlists and everything. But all right, we'll deal with the first thing then. As Rich said about the 3 players who are out of contract at the end of the season, Mohamed Salah, Virgil van Dijk and Trent Alexander-Arnold. Very briefly, who stays and who goes in your opinion? Because the reality is we don't know. And anybody who says it, as Virgil van Dijk said, is a liar. Yeah,
no, that was interesting, wasn't it? I still think Salah and Van Dijk stay, and I think Trent will go. And I've sort of made peace with Trent leaving now over the last few months. It's just becoming a bit more clear, hasn't it? Particularly as after Real Madrid tried to get him in January. That was a bit of a strange move, wasn't it, from their end? But trying to speak to Liverpool just before the January window opened and got told no.
I think they were just chancing their arm, weren't they?
Yeah. But I still think that'll happen now. There's been less talk, hasn't there, about Trent staying than there has of the other 2. Maybe because he's spoken less about it. I think he's only given one update about it, hasn't he, back in September. Salah is regularly called up by broadcasters. He's on Sky and stuff, and we speak to Van Dijk after every game, and every now and again that comes up as well. So yeah, I still think those 2 will stay, and I think Trent will go, and that's a massive creativity void that we'll need filling. The biggest issue for me is probably Liverpool won't get a fee for him. Liverpool aren't really the sort of club who can happily lose one of the best players for nothing. I mean, what club can? But in terms of not having that money to reinvest, I think that'll be the biggest blow for Liverpool. Even though if he does leave, they will be losing such a massive part of how they work. And I think just seeing Jarell Quansah at right back at the weekend against Newcastle sort of showed you how much Liverpool will miss Alexander-Arnold, how much they do miss him when he doesn't play, because every time Quansah was getting the ball, he was just sort of shuffling it down the line. We didn't do anything particularly poorly, but it's just a different kettle of fish, isn't it, when Alexander-Arnold gets it, shifts it out of his feet, and then all of a sudden there's a chance.
Conor Bradley would play if he'd been fit, and I think Joe Gomez as well is probably a little bit more forward-thinking than Jarell Quansah. Although Jarell Quansah, by the way, did very well when he came on at right back against Paris Saint-Germain.
Yeah, but it's just not the same, isn't it? And that is what Liverpool are going to, the sort of shortfall that they will have to make up for in some way if Alexander-Arnold does leave. So we'll see. But like I say, I didn't expect massive turnover, but as it's sort of gone on over the last few weeks, you're looking at it and thinking, well, a lot of this stuff will need addressing. And I wrote earlier this week, I think at some point Liverpool need to make a decision either way on these contracts, because it can't be helpful for recruitment planning elsewhere. Liverpool won't be able to know what they're able to commit in terms of salaries, transfer fees, positions that they need to look for. So it's a bit of a mess, isn't it, really?
Who do you think will stay? Who do you think will go?
Well, I agree with Gorsty on the two that would stay in Salah and Van Dijk, and Trent going to Real Madrid after they had a little flirt in January. But that, I say I agree with him because that sounds like the logical thing, doesn't it? In my head, that's the logical thing that will happen. The other two players are older. They're probably at the best club that they'll play for. They can probably earn more money elsewhere, but they won't be playing in as competitive leagues. Whereas Trent's slightly different, younger player, still got the best years of his career in front of him. He's won the lot at Liverpool. He could go and do it somewhere else. And
why would he waste it at Real Madrid, though? Such a terrible club.
I mean, they got such a poor stadium, haven't they?
Yeah, the thing is, they got that sense of entitlement. You know my thoughts on Real Madrid. Anyway, go on, Tom.
Yeah, but it's as old as time, isn't it? People want to go there, and will continue to do so by the looks of things. But I think we've got to be honest and say that this situation was quite avoidable. We're talking about indecision on 3 players and their contracts, but I was expecting these contracts to have been wrapped up on Christmas Day. I was expecting on Christmas Day, right?
Was you actually? Yeah, because I've heard this as a theory.
Yeah,
this is.
I was all in on this, right? I thought these know what they're doing, right? Christmas Day, open the presents, yeah, make a coffee, have a croissant or whatever you do in your house. You know what I mean? You get the croissants on Christmas Day, yeah.
Croissants on Christmas Day.
Yeah. Early. Well, the thing is, right? You can have
bacon butties in our house.
Yeah,
but you can have a big meal later on, aren't you? So you don't want to overfill on it. You know, if you get too excited.
Speak for yourself.
yeah. It's a late lunch, isn't it?
You may have planned better. Fair enough.
Put a Baileys in that coffee. It's Christmas.
Well, I'm not rolling that out. Right. Anyway, you've done the formalities. I was expecting to open my phone, and in front of me is a little video of Mo Salah signing contract. You know, with the hat on, it's all done. Maybe the 3 of them round the fire. Okay, but no, it didn't happen, did it? And I thought, oh, well, maybe it'll be done before the January transfer window opens, which still hasn't been done.
But we know why it's not been done, because there was it kind of fell between the cracks, didn't it, when everything else was getting changed over the last 2 or 3 years. So there's quite a lot of things about to have happened for it to get to this point. I think less so with Trent. I suspect that he wanted to keep his options open, and if he ends up at Real Madrid and he wants to go to Real Madrid, then it's paid off for him. The other two is slightly different because they quite clearly want to stay.
Yeah,
and it's more of a question of, I don't even think it almost isn't even the money, is it, to a certain degree? I think it's more, this is their last big move of their careers, full stop. In terms of a competitive level, I mean, what do you count big? Playing in the Champions League or playing for loads of money in Saudi Arabia?
But I think that shows you how the landscape's changed a little in football, though, isn't it? Because Mo Salah and Virgil van Dijk are both Liverpool legends. So why wouldn't they want to finish their careers as Liverpool legends? Now, in the past, that would be normal, and players might only leave because they become surplus to requirements. These aren't players who are surplus to requirements. These players are absolutely integral to Liverpool performing at the top end of the league table. Well, probably the best defender ever seen play for the club, and a forward who's right up there, and the main supplier and assister of the goals across the season, and absolutely fit as a fiddle. You know what I mean? He's never looked better, has he? So he does. I think he needs support. Salah, it can't all be on him, and he needs better. Does need better forwards around him, and I agree that's an area where Liverpool definitely need to.
If he stays, I can't see him playing absolutely every single game next season.
Salah.
I think that might be part of the reason that, look, Mo, you're not going to be playing every single game.
There's only 3 players who played in all of Liverpool's 29 Premier League games. Ryan Gravenberch, who's 22 years of age, and Salah and Van Dijk. So that importance to the cause is laid bare by that stat. But I've been looking back over what they've been saying, and Van Dijk said to us literally last week when we sat down with him to preview the Carabao Cup final.
You got to sit down? I was
sit
supposed to
down
stand up in the mix zone and trying to get 5 minutes with him.
So, I don't know. I was just saying that I've actually forgot what he said. So I'll say what Salah said. He said when we spoke to him, I'm not planning to retire. And Van Dijk made the point of saying, I feel as fit as I have at any point in my career. So, I reading between the lines, get the feeling that Liverpool are concerned that there's going to be a drop-off and it's going to be sharp and sudden for these players who are 32 and 33. I mean, Van Dijk's 34 in July, Salah's 33 in June. So, obviously, getting on a bit, aren't they, in terms of by the time next season kicks off, they're not going to be you know, they're looking into the sort of twilight of their careers. But I've seen no indication that either of them are going to drop off suddenly. And it's okay, it has happened in the past with certain players. I remember Rio Ferdinand almost overnight, wasn't it? It looked like he'd fallen off a cliff. And it can happen, but...
Rashford.
Yeah, but
do you mean Rashford who's in the Champions League quarterfinals, Marcus Rashford?
Well, he is now, yeah. Now he's moved to another club. Yeah.
Liverpool have... Sorry to interrupt, Paul, but you mentioned then about, you know, the players falling off the cliff and stuff like that. Liverpool have been reasonably good at sorting this out, haven't they? Because they kind of saw Firmino towards the end, didn't offer him a contract. Fabinho, they were about 6 months too late. Henderson was about the right time. Milner, you know, by the end, he didn't really play that often in the last 18 months. And since he's left, I think he's played about 2 games this season, hasn't he, for Brighton? I know he left the season before. So, and Mane, even someone like Mane. Mane didn't really do much at Bayern Munich, and now he's in Saudi as well. Yeah. So, Wijnaldum, another one. You know, they've been quite good at knowing when the race has been run for a number of players. And
that's a good point, yeah.
And a good point in terms of we might have to write about it at some point.
Jot this one down.
Mental notes. And I wonder whether or not that's kind of in their thinking. But by the same token, it's 2 players, because we're talking about obviously Van Dijk and Salah being slightly different to Trent. Even if you give them a 2-year contract at the same money that they're on now, you know it's probably going to be decent value, because unless they get an actual serious injury, which they could get at any point, no matter what their age, doesn't matter whether they're 33 or 23 or 18, that they're still going to be able to contribute. I mean, certainly a centre-back, Van Dijk, because he's had to change his game over the past 2 years, because it was noticeable when he came back from the injury. He did all right, and then he had that kind of dip.
Yeah.
And he had to kind of recalibrate his kind of radar, as it were, because he knew he couldn't quite move so quick, so he had to redo that. And we actually saw that in action, and now he's totally fine with it. So he knows when he can go for something, when he can't.
Yeah. Also, after he had a function midfield in front of him.
Well, there is that as well. You don't have to do quite as much. With Salah, the other thing about Salah is Trent. He's had such a great, you know, partnership down that right wing for nearly all of the entire time he's played for Liverpool. That Trent going is a bit of a big deal, because he's someone who links so well with Salah down that wing. And we mentioned Conor Bradley; he's got a bit there as well. He's obviously got something there. Harvey Elliott, to a certain degree, when he played on the right of the midfield 3, but obviously they don't play that formation anymore. It is about getting Salah into the game, and certainly the last couple of weeks, I actually think Trent's been probably one of Liverpool's best players, and they're going to miss him when he's injured at the moment. So it will be interesting to see what they do with that. But whether or not that's part of the thinking, maybe, you know, they think, well, what way does Arne Slot want to play now? Because this is now going to be the first time he's going to be putting his team together, as opposed to taking on another squad and moulding it around that. We mentioned the forwards, which we've done a million times over. We know about that. He might want to change the way they attack from fullback. He's probably going to have to sign a right back, and we know that they're going to be looking at a left back. So that's 2 important positions.
Yeah,
we haven't even mentioned Canati yet, and you know he's about to enter the last year of his contract, and Real Madrid and Paris Saint-Germain are sniffing around. You might have to get a centre back, a main centre back. Joe Gomez hasn't really played well. When he has played, he's been quite good this year actually, but a bit injury prone, and we know Newcastle were in for him, and he's probably thinking, well, hang on, Liverpool are quite happy to sell me. So whether that's at the back of his mind, so. There are quite a few key positions that are going to get changed probably, and it will reflect the way that the manager's changing the team and the way he wants it to play. So it's whether that's kind of a conversation that Salah's having, or Liverpool might think, well, we might want to go down a different road. Because what was interesting, remember when Slot started and Van Dijk said, I'm being asked to do something different, I'm being asked to move up and pass into midfield rather than always just play the diagonals and stuff like that. And because he's a really good player, he could do it. And Salah's obviously a really good player as well, but he needs the people around him, and it's whether they're going to build a team around somebody who is 32, 33 and then isn't going to be, you know, there for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
But then that goes back to what I said before.
I've got a theory
if he's not playing all the time, but he wants to stay, then fine.
I've got a general theory that Liverpool are terrified of
everything,
of waste in terms of
signing contracts.
Yeah.
Signing players.
Like, you know, say, for example, Salah asks for 3 years, and they give him it, and he only gives you 2 years at this level, and then for the 3rd year, it's, you know, a bit of petering out at the age of whatever he will be, 36, and Liverpool are still paying him what he's on now, for example. I think they're terrified of that as a prospect, whereas maybe a club less risk averse and with a different model look at it differently in terms of this is what he'll give you for 2 years rather than you'll have this year that'll just be X amount of money down the pan essentially. I don't know whether they're thinking of it like that.
My argument to that would be surely Salah has got enough in the bank over the amount of time.
I don't think that.
I'm not saying you're saying that. That over the last 8 years to go, you know what? He's worth this for even if he only produces half of what he's done over this season. That's still more than almost everybody else.
He'll win you the league this season. Yeah, he could win you it again next season. Same with Van Dijk.
And if he drops off in the second season, we say they give him a 2-year contract, then that's just it. You know, you more than got value for money for him for the transfer fee you paid for him, and the amount of stuff you've won and the goals that he's got for that.
I feel like there'd be less anxiety around the Salah and Van Dijk situation if there were sort of ready-made replacements to come in, like successors to these positions. Salah does not have a successor.
Well, that goes back to what I was saying about maybe the team might have to get changed around it, the approach, because they won't have him.
You've just said there, Rich, that Van Dijk is the best defender you've seen at Liverpool, and Salah obviously right up there, third highest scorer of all time in the club's history. You can't replace those, really, can you? At the stroke of a brush, you know, you're not just going to bring in another centre-back who's going to be at a similar level. You're not going to bring in a forward who's going to score you. You know, what's Salah going to end up with in the Premier League? 25 plus?
Yeah, but if you look at, like, Trent, a lot of people think he might go. There's a good chance he will, okay. But what are we going to do if he leaves? We need to go and buy a right-back? Well, maybe, but Conor Bradley looks a really good player. He's got a lot to learn. You know, he's not the level of Trent Alexander-Arnold, but I think I'm seeing in him quality. He's a different type of player, but I'm seeing in the qualities that I think of someone who could play for Liverpool for a very long time. Could even be a future captain. I think he's got the right character for it, and we will change the way we play if he becomes your regular right back. But whereas I could see him potentially as a natural successor to Alexander-Arnold.
Well, they're in talks over a new deal with him, so that would suggest that they see him as a long-term.
Yeah. I do think they need two right backs. Though, really, they need to sign someone else. So I quite like Olena at Forest.
The problem is he's nearly 30.
Is he?
I know, but if he was cover for Bradley, it's not so bad. I think come and join us for 2 seasons or whatever.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from. But it's not a very FSG signing though, is it?
No,
but he'll cost a fair whack.
But if he gets in the
he's out of contract,
so
maybe wages.
He's
out of contract in the summer.
There you go.
There we go. Right.
Jonathan Tah by Leverkusen is as well.
That's another story. That's 2 now.
Yeah,
2 things we can
I think
write.
Central had that one, but we can discuss that offline. But
okay,
I do. So in my logical head, that's the way I could see that. I know people talk about Frimpong as well being possibly an option. You can play both sides actually. So and he's Dutch, so that might impress lots.
Now, we've got some responses here. One of them, somebody's. Let me just get this. Speak between yourselves. Says, glad Doyle is back. Our form dipped when he was away. Well, that's nice.
Who's that from?
That's from CM, who not CM Punk, I don't think. He may be one.
Maybe.
He may very well be one.
CM the Punk.
Yeah. Bad news for him though, or her, is that I'm not in for 3 of the next 4. So if they get beat by Everton, don't blame me. Brilliant show, guys. Keep up the good work, says Barry McLaughlin, who's also sent in a question. And this goes back onto what we were talking about, the contract. It says, do you feel the contract renewals are putting a cloud over what should be a joyous title charge, especially as we are keen to celebrate a title win in the stadium in a non-COVID environment?
No, not a bit of it. Absolutely not having this one. I saw someone say this on Twitter yesterday, of all places, and I'm just not having a player's contract situation should cloud supporters enjoying a potential title win. If it does, then I'd argue that you're probably doing it wrong.
Yeah, I agree. I wrote something today basically saying that, it's all right to be glum, but Liverpool are 12 points clear at the top of the Premier League. If you can't enjoy it now, you see there are some people on social media, and it's like every single day we get messages off them, and it's always like, no, and it's like, I'm pretty sure if you go on their profiles, it never says, well, that was a good win today, or I'm looking forward to this game, or wasn't that a great goal by this player? It's always the negative stuff.
Yeah, I think in a week where you've lost a cup final and you've been kicked out the Champions League, it's quite easy to get drawn in with the negative aspects and uncertainty around contracts. And we've acknowledged that's an issue and it exists. But, you know, don't let that detract from the main purpose of football, which is entertainment and enjoyment, you know, being with your mates and making good memories. And that's exactly what we are honing in on here, a 20th league title. For me personally, I'll be able to, when that happens, not if, when, I'll be able to mark that moment with me son in the ground, which will be something very special. So I'm not going to worry about Mo Salah's contract when I've got that possibility coming around the corner. Obviously, we had the COVID league title, which was ruined, really, because you couldn't celebrate it properly. It was almost like a default win in the end because, it's a league title and that barren run's been ended, but it's not been marked properly. And that was the first one after my dad died. So you should tap... Football's about emotion. You should tap into the emotional side of it, and winning that league title is going to be...
positive emotions.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's coming down the road, and we need to make the most of it. And there'll be a lot of things could happen afterwards, but don't worry about them.
Well, in fact, that makes that makes it all the more important to then enjoy it. If you're going to have a squad that's about to split up and be disbanded, exactly. Others know you don't know what's going to happen, but you do know that the 12 points clear, and if they win an X amount of games, then they're going to win it. So get behind them.
So there's the answer for Barry.
Exactly.
And, thanks for watching, listening, Barry. Is he enjoying what he's listening?
No, he was being very positive about it. He was merely just posing the question. There's another one from him a bit later on. Julian Baxendale, which is a very strong name, and I like that.
Julian is a regular, I think.
Baxendale's a very strong surname as well. I feel as that's a good name.
Where's Sanjay Mishra? Is he in the mixer?
Yeah, not yet. But do you go massive and get in a marquee signing like Isak, and not Isaac, because I was calling him on the Newcastle podcast.
Isak.
And try to get another season out of several other players in the squad, or do you spread the funds out and bring in 5 squad players?
Yeah,
I mean, squad players meaning players for the squad.
Yeah, it's a good question.
I think we already know the answer, don't we?
In a way, it's a bit similar to what Liverpool decided to do with Bellingham,
exactly,
and not do with Bellingham. I mean, there was never any guarantee he was going to go to Liverpool, and I think maybe pulling out of the races Liverpool did was maybe a bit of a face-shaving exercise because they knew he was Real Madrid banned anyway. But they've basically allocated that funds to go towards McAllister, Szoboszlai, and Gravenberch, didn't they, as opposed to just lumping the large majority of it on Bellingham. So you can't really say that hasn't worked out. Liverpool got an entirely new midfield, and they're all sort of 22, 24, 25 maybe. And then throw in Endo, his little Brucey bonus as well. So you could say that has worked out. But despite that, I'd probably still say Alexander Isak looks like the best possible number 9 that Liverpool can get this summer.
For 100 million, though?
No, I mean, that's big money, isn't it? If Newcastle don't get the Champions League, I don't really think they'll be able to ask for that, to be honest. It all depends on what their PSR situation is, and I'd be fascinated to hear someone like Lee Ryder or, someone who's connected up in the North East to sort of talk a little bit more about what Newcastle are able or aren't able to do this summer in terms of all that. So that could be an issue. But the big sort of what if is how much Saudi Arabia interest remains in Darwin Núñez. That could be the one that banks Liverpool a big old chunk of money in the way that Fabinho did unexpectedly a couple of years ago, and that helped, towards the rebuild.
We were both in agreement over Isak's comments this week, weren't we?
Yeah.
They very much sounded like somebody who may not be planning on being at Newcastle next season.
These players are always a bit more forthright on international duty, aren't they?
Yeah.
Ryan Babel used to do that years ago. Romelu Lukaku used to do it when he was at Everton. Every time they got a chance to speak to Belgian or Dutch journalists, they were always a bit more honest and
Why was he speaking to the Dutch?
Sorry?
Why was he speaking to Dutch?
Who?
Lukaku?
No, he wasn't. It was the other way around. And Isak speaking to a Swedish TV station Wednesday, was it? Didn't exactly nail his black and white colours to the mast, did he?
No.
So that'll be interesting. See what happens. If Newcastle don't get Champions League, I think that becomes more of a prospect of him leaving, and then it will be a case of who's at the front of the queue.
At least he'll have his scarf.
Yeah.
What do you think Liverpool should go all in for a massive signing at the risk of not signing 2 or 3 others for the squad?
Well, in terms of the transfer fee, they were going to spend over £100 million on a defensive midfielder not that long ago. There was a deal agreed. So there must be a bit of money swashing about.
Well, they got 60 million, 50 odd million for Zubimendi, which they never spent.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I mean, but we know that there's some money there, but it's a matter of, as Gorst said, he will probably be reliant on Saudi Arabia going, here's 70 odd million for Nunes or whatever.
I wouldn't blink at paying that for Isaac if Nunes
If you get
goes
70
for
million,
that.
yeah, because then it's net 30 million, isn't it?
It's a shoo-in. But although I did hear 150 being banded about
That's
not
just
that long ago.
ridiculous.
So
Absolutely no chance.
Yeah.
they're not going to do that, are they?
I mean, the fees have actually started to come down a little bit in recent years,
Yeah.
which is good.
I don't
They're
think
just
it'll be
getting
100
preposterous.
million as well. I think
Yeah, I
if he leaves, you're looking at sort of 85.
He signed for about 60 odd.
Yeah.
So
Maybe with a sort of a Nunes style add-ons package that could take you potentially over 100 million or something like that. I mean, don't get me wrong, I would very much like to see Alexander Isak in a Liverpool shirt next season. That would be ideal for me. I did like him before he signed for Newcastle, I'd like to point out. But,
all right. Yeah, sorry first, yeah.
He's La Liga Young Player of the Year before he moved to Newcastle. Yeah.
Not claiming to be some magic scout or something.
Scored in the Euros, the 2021 Euros
Against Spain.
Yeah.
But to answer the question though, if Salah stays, that big chunk of money might be better reinvested across the squad. But if he did leave, then on one hand, you need to replace him, and that could be the man to do it in terms of your chief supplier of goals. But on the other hand, if you ended up losing the three players who were out of contract at the end of the season, then you've got quite a bit of squad re-engineering to do. Quite a lot on the hands there. And that money may be better spent in different ways.
In terms of wages as well, I think Salah leaves. He's obviously on the biggest contract ever at Liverpool. That frees up quite a lot of wriggle room on the wage bill for a couple of big stars. And there's no getting around it. Like I said before, I don't think you're ever going to effectively replace a Van Dijk or a Salah. But you're going to have to absolutely try your best if they do leave, and that means pushing the boat out, I think.
Will it free up a bit more money to keep you on the FSG payroll, though?
No. I don't think I can reply to that, can I?
Now, He-Man88...
It's essentially, what is it, an accusation of...
basically,
bribery,
yeah, basically. It's totally
scandalous.
out of order. I mean,
Is that a new watch, Paul?
it's not a new shirt, I can confirm that. Sorry. Says the man who's wears the same thing every pod. Right, question from He-Man88, which presumably is not from Castle Grayskull. He's
got a big cat.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Don't make him angry.
Okay.
He put me off there.
Sorry.
We're talking about Isaac, and he's got a little bit agitated. He says he'll, of course, keep on picking up injuries. He's been injured 3 to 8 times in the last 5 seasons. Just because he's wearing a red shirt, will not stop him being injured. He's not worth it. It would be stupid.
I mean, his injury issues is an area for debate, isn't it? I think that's probably the only one, really, in terms of why wouldn't you want a player like that at your club?
He's made of glass.
He's no He-Man, is he?
Well, he's not a master of the universe. He did have a groin injury, didn't he, against Liverpool recently? That's why he missed the game at Anfield. Yeah, it's a fair
Maybe
point.
He hasn't got a strong skeleton. That's absolutely awful, isn't it?
That's the
Sorry,
worst.
I'm
We're just
really
ending the
sorry.
pod.
I'm
Move on.
really, really sorry.
Let's move on. See, I'm trying to be serious, yeah.
Exactly, sorry.
At the injury point, it's a fair point, isn't it? I think, but he's the most in-demand striker on the continent, so obviously a few people are looking beyond that.
And he hasn't been injured that much this season, has
He
he?
hasn't been injured last season either. I had a look, actually. Since he's been at Newcastle the last couple of years, he's actually not been that injured that much.
That's just one of those things that gets said.
Just sad.
Well, what it does do, though, underlines that Salah is never, apart from that one time, his entire time at Liverpool, he's never injured. And that's the one thing that he was. Wijnaldum was the same. Fabinho, apart from, I think he got injured once, he was the same.
Suarez
was always
famously
compared to Daniel Sturridge. You can be a great player if you want, but you'd be as good as me if you're not playing. So, that's the thing. If you can get in players who are durable, Liverpool obviously have had, Canate's picked up injuries. Liverpool have had a bit of a hit and miss thing with that over a certain period of time. Thiago was another one. But if the more players you can get who are fit, and we're talking about, you can't help it if someone goes straight through you and breaks your leg, or someone goes straight through you and does your ACL. at Goodison.
With that in mind, do you think it's the end of the road for Diogo Jota, maybe?
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because I do think he's possibly picked up one injury too many. We've mentioned this quite a few times.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
I just think that's unfortunate as well. And also the way that he plays the game, he does love a run, and he loves that thing where he just runs straight at players in the hope that they get out the way, and he picks up quite a few knocks just by doing that. And that's not really worked for him at the moment, so...
Yeah, that was something Jamie Carragher said, actually, didn't he, when he come in to do the pod? You know, before the season started, and he said he just wanted Jota to be a little bit smarter over the duels that he put himself into, and he said sometimes he'd watch Liverpool and he's almost wincing at some of the things he does, and then he goes and gets that injury against Chelsea, which is, you know, the exact thing that Carragher was talking about, I guess, and Tosin Adarabioyo falls on him and he's injured for 4 months, basically. So... yeah, I do think the injuries have caught up with Jota now a little bit. You know, they've been at Liverpool 5 years now and they've never really gone away, have they?
Sorry, Julian's got back and says, I can assure you that at my school, Julian definitely wasn't considered a solid name, which just kind of show kids are awful, aren't they?
Yeah.
And we were all one, some of the stuff that they say. Now, Ian CR, which sounds a little bit like Ian Kroll, who is our Everton supporting producer, it says here, I've never heard so much delusion on Bull when he eventually does leave in 2 or 3 years. And I don't mean who he's referring to here. Oh, Isaac, sorry. He's going to a club like Real Madrid or Barcelona, not a club like Liverpool, sorry. I'm assuming... I don't
Why
know.
Barcelona?
What, a club like Liverpool?
Barcelona
What does that
can't
mean?
even register players. You've seen what's going on with them.
Yeah.
They're not going to be able to
No,
do
no,
any of
mate,
this. No, it's just... this idea that Barcelona are still some sort of moneyed machine, it just isn't true.
They are top
You
of
look
the
at what
league
they've
and
had.
the
No, they are.
favourites to
But
win the
like,
Champions League.
on the pitch, they're having a great season because they've got players like Lamine Yamal and, you know, young players. Got Rafinha in from Leeds, who's become one of the best players in Europe. They're not some sort of team who spend 80, 90, 100 million on players anymore. They couldn't even register. Who was it? Dani Olmo.
Dani Olmo, yeah.
They had all kinds of trouble just to get him registered. So I'm not having Barcelona as a sort of financial behemoth. Real Madrid, fair enough.
Where's he going to play in that team? What?
Lewandowski's getting on a bit, I guess, isn't he? But
that's why 2 to 3 years.
Barca, but I mean, I can't see he's not going to Real Madrid.
Well, Mbappe will go to Everton, won't he? Because they've got a new stadium. Come on. Now, suck me a second. Going back to something we were talking about before, says, we're not enjoying the 12-point lead because we've seen we don't play good football. It's system football, safety first, which has worked very well in the league, but not elsewhere. Well, aren't they a misery?
I'm not going for a
Well,
pint
that's
of
not
this.
true, is it? Because it worked in the Champions League.
And also, it worked in the League Cup all the way up to the final.
Yeah.
And, you know, they literally played Paris Saint-Germain a few days earlier. And, okay, they were terrible in the first game, but Liverpool were very good in the second one, in the second half particularly.
So Liverpool played, what was it, 10 games in the Champions League?
Yeah.
They lost one, which was a dead rubber, and then lost another.
Which
Which
they
ended up
losing on penalties.
Yeah. So it was just unfortunate, really, that they drew a team as good as PSG. And okay, I certainly argued at the time that if you want to win the Champions League, you've got to play a top team or two at least at some point. But you imagine if next season they end up finishing high up the 36-team group stage, you'd be hopeful that they'd avoid playing a side as good as that in the last 16.
Liverpool are definitely more pragmatic under Slot. You know what I mean? They play in a more conservative way than they ever did under Jurgen Klopp. But I don't have the stats in front of me. I'm pretty sure they concede less goals as well.
Well, they basically play like what you would describe a normal team as playing.
Yeah.
It's like the Klopp thing was very unusual. That's just Jurgen Klopp. And when you can't get it right, you end up being Tottenham under Ang. That's what, you know, they're kind of the same thing, but they're just not as good as doing it. And I know they've got some injuries as well, but they don't have the players to do it and probably not quite the tactics. But that's kind of a version of what Klopp was playing, whereas Slot's taking it a little step back and taking it back, well, you know, because you're even older than I am, taking it back to the roots.
I'm not too sure on that.
Oh, I know, how old are you?
45.
Oh, no. Okay, that's disappointing.
Are you actually 45?
I thought you were way
yeah.
older than
Wow.
that. I'm ever so sorry. I'm not
Yeah,
really.
thank
I'm
you.
not really.
Public apology accepted.
Well, you're not as old as me, but you will remember Liverpool winning stuff in the 80s.
Yeah.
And they didn't, the 87-88 team aside, they didn't necessarily play thrilling, massively entertaining football all the time, but they played winning football. And when you start winning games and you have the confidence, then you again then get the ability to then start playing with a bit more freedom.
Well, the first game I ever went to was against Southampton. I think it was, off memory, I think it was in 88. But what I can remember for certain was before the game, Alan Hansen was presented with the league title and lifted it, and everyone went, well done. You know what I mean? He just won the league.
Same again next year.
Yeah, like literally that, and that's what I was like. I was like, "What's happening here, Dad?" And he was like, "Oh yeah, we've won the league, so it's been presented now." And that is the level of regularity in which Liverpool were winning the league title. So it probably did become. Well, I can tell you now. He told me it won it that often. It had become a little bit boring. You know what I mean? So a 12-point lead might be seen as a bit boring at the moment. Maybe don't like the way they're playing or whatever, or worried about contract situations and whatnot. But it's not to be dismissed too lightly. You know what I mean? I quite like them to win that 20th league title. I haven't seen one since, you know what I mean, 1990, apart from one played behind closed doors. So I wouldn't worry too much at the moment about how they're playing. Just get it won and enjoy it. We've come back to this, haven't we? You've got to enjoy. You don't know when you're going to win your next league title. What if this team gets ripped up? Yeah. You might be swashing about like. Well, I wouldn't say Man United, it wouldn't be that bad, but you know, you could be not in the mix for the league next year because of the changes that need to be implemented. You need to enjoy these moments whilst you can.
You could easily have a season like Man City, couldn't you? Next year, it could happen.
Yeah,
where you just in sort of no man's land in terms of where you need to rebuild, and you haven't yet done it, but you know you're still sort of in that transition period. That could happen. Even if they do keep the players they want to keep. So, like Rich says, I think supporters should enjoy the next 2 months, 3 months.
They should.
Wholeheartedly, yeah.
They should, but some of them won't, will they?
I think this little break has come at a good time, I think, especially after the disappointment of Sunday.
Not for people who haven't to write about Liverpool, it hasn't come at a good time.
Yeah, not in a professional capacity. And scratching around for something to do. But I don't want any of the Reach bosses to listen to that, by the way. We've got loads on.
Well, thank God you haven't put it on an official Reach channel.
We planned accordingly for the lack of football.
We are rushed off our feet.
That would be terrible if you did that, yeah. This doesn't say Echo, this says Echo. Anyway, you were saying.
Moving on. I forgot what my point was now. No.
HR meeting on Monday.
No, I think the breaks come at a decent time to just have a bit of a reset.
Yeah.
You know, get back in and you know, players were disappointed. It took a lot out of them losing to PSG in the manner that they did, which, particularly in that first half, I thought was a fantastic game of football.
Yeah, it was really good. Yeah.
Really, really high level game of football.
Proper football.
Yeah. That was as good a standard as you'll see, I think. And losing that probably it's taken it out of our wings, and we'll come up against the team on Sunday who really, really wanted to win a trophy, and it is what it is.
Slot said after the game and at Wembley that we wished he had the game just to get it out of his head and out of the system.
I'm not pretty sure he's not doing that.
Out of his system, I guess, is a better phrase for Anna. But I mean, there's an element to that, and there's an element of having to listen to this be the storyline for a week to Liverpool. Perhaps wheels are falling off. But like Rich says, the break has come at a good time for loads of players who are in need of a rest. And also, they don't immediately play next weekend either, do they? So the players are getting back from international duty, maybe the South American lads on a Thursday. But then they don't play until the Wednesday against Everton. So even after that, they've still got 6 days of rest. So there should be no excuses for them to come flying out the traps against Everton and start to put right what was a bad week, and all focus turns to getting the title done and dusted.
The wheels haven't fallen off, but they have had a bit of a slow puncher in the last couple of weeks. Glad you mentioned Man United, by the way. You owe me a tenner. £5 for the didn't beat Real Sociedad, and then £5 for. I know we're going to go back to that. £5 for they beat Leicester, which you said they wouldn't. But I've doubled up, haven't I? I've given you a chance of winning back one of those fivers by saying I think United will win the Europa League and you don't. But that says a lot about the standard of the Europa League, that they're able to have a very good chance of winning it, because most of the good teams have gone into the Champions League now. With it's been extended and it makes it a little bit more difficult. That's why, again, it was unlucky that Liverpool ended up playing against PSG. But as Rich said, the first half, that was what we'd term as, it doesn't really get much better than that in terms of football. And if if you lose those games, that's not, you can accept that. I think what you couldn't accept is the way that they lost against Newcastle. But one doesn't happen without the other one. And I think, they are the travails of a team that's trying to be successful. That's what happens, I'm afraid. Right, Barry McLaughlin's got another question. He says, would a player like Dean Huijsen, how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
The Bournemouth lad?
Huijsen or Housen, I think he is acceptable.
Which one are we going for? for future reference.
Well, you said Huyson, didn't you?
Okay,
So
we'll say
let's
that.
stick with that.
Hoyson sounds like a sauce, though, doesn't it?
It does actually.
Yeah.
Also, sounds like Glenn Hussein. He used to
Who
play
said-
for, he used to play for Liverpool.
Whose name used to be pronounced in different ways. A bit like Hippier and Hoopier, isn't it?
Well, it's like Jan Molby. That's not, his name isn't pronounced Jan Molby, really. It's Jan Molbu. Is how you're supposed
Is
to
it?
pronounce
Is
it?
it?
Yeah, it's how you're supposed to pronounce it. Yeah,
Get
but
out of town.
I will in a minute. I've got some work to do, but for now, I've got to finish this podcast. But yeah, that's how you pronounce it.
I have never heard that before in my life.
Well, it's from the
I've
man
met
himself.
Jan
From the
Molby.
man
I'm
himself.
going to ask him next time I see
Exactly,
him.
I see him all the time. Anyway, the question is, I've lost it. There it is. Right. Would a player like Dean Huyson, whatever, come the Dean, the Bournemouth guy, would he go to another Premier League team where he's already been a first team regular and come to be back up to Van Dijk and Canati, or if Liverpool are interested in him, would that suggest that it's kind of succession planning?
See, the thing with him is Liverpool are acutely aware of him because I remember having a conversation with someone in the summer who was sort of using his move to Bournemouth from Juventus as a bit of a barometer for Sepp van den Berg's valuation, which Liverpool eventually got 22.5 million for from Brentford. So they know all about him. What I would say is he's very young, and Liverpool tend to recruit for the first team for players who played somewhere between sort of 125 and 175 senior appearances. He hasn't got anywhere near that. I think it's only around about 50 for Juventus. I think he had a little loan spell at Roma, and obviously this season at Bournemouth, I think he's played maybe 25, 26 games for them. So I think there's still a little bit of seasoning to do for him, but he does look like a player with a big future. I think he made his senior international debut last night, did he, for Spain?
Against Van Dijk?
Against Holland, having shunned the opportunity to play for them. He's played for Spain instead. But yeah, one to keep an eye on. I think he's a really good player. Looks comfortable on the ball. Had a great season for Bournemouth, who still on the fringes of the Champions League shake-up, aren't they? So yeah, one to watch. But I'd just be a bit concerned, or I'm not sure whether Liverpool would go and sort of spend 50 million on him at the moment when he still hasn't had bags of experience.
A question here from Mark Redwood says, how close are Liverpool to breaking UEFA finance rules? Our wage to turnover percentage is nearly maxed out. And if true, you can see why FSG are dragging out these contracts. Now, Dave Powell, our business of football person, would know a lot more about that than we do.
Yeah.
So I don't think we can actually answer that. However, having said that, if that is true, that might be a reason why FSG are dragging out the contracts, because they know they can't commit to these players until they know which other players might be leaving, and going back to what we were saying before about which one's coming in and out, but not necessarily in terms of the personnel, but in terms of the maximum wage. That they can
It
actually...
will be a consideration, definitely. I think Liverpool have got the second highest wage bill in England at 300.
Well, they're paying you off for a start.
Yeah. I did write this the other day. 378 million, I think it is. 377.6, I think is the actual figure of the wage bill, which is all of the entire club, I think. So yeah, I don't know what the threshold is in terms of percentage, but I think it's 63% of their revenue is wages. So I don't know what the sort of UEFA guideline is. So that Dave will know a little bit more about that than us. But yeah, it probably is a consideration when you consider that Salah is already the highest paid player Liverpool have ever had. An increase on whatever he's being paid at the moment is automatically the biggest contract ever, isn't it? So that is a consideration. Van Dijk as well is up there, not too far below Salah, I'd guess, and Trent won't be too far down either. So these are three major contract renewals that very delicate situations, I guess.
Right, before we finish, we'll throw out a question. By the way, someone said, was it a hard paper round for Richard or Barry? This is Barry McLaughlin again. Was it a hard paper round for Richard or a great beauty routine for Ian? Therefore, meaning that
Are you meeting Barry after the show? Or?
Yeah. Well, if you want beauty routines, it's Mr. Moisturiser here, Paul Gorst. He's
no moisturiser.
Barry's had about 5 questions over there. He's just finding it all.
70% wages to turnover. It is
70. Yeah, so they're only 7% off that. Really, that is probably a bit of a concern.
Okay.
Who have they got on the books who would significantly free up that without losing a big player? If you know what I mean. There's not too many, is there?
Nunez, possibly.
Yeah. I mean, Nunez Nunes on
Alisson?
140.
Alisson, but he's a big player.
Yeah.
But
He's quite good.
Nunes and Jota.
Yeah. So, final question then is who do you... I won't ask who's going to join Liverpool because that could be an entirely different podcast and it probably will be at some point. It's a very long international break and another one where they're not playing. Who do you expect to see leaving Liverpool? You've already mentioned Trent, so he's gone. So who else do you... Would you not be surprised to see go?
I think this will be Kelleher's last summer. I think it makes no sense for Liverpool to keep him because Mamardashvili's coming in. Alisson will stay. So it'll just be a waste of a year of Kelleher's career, keeping him on the books. Third choice, probably won't play. Liverpool will have to relent on the asking price for him, but they won't do it too much. They will find some wriggle room, and I expect him to leave. After that, is this the last year for Joe Gomez? 10 years after he joined, possibly. Nunes, I think will go.
Jota?
Less convinced on Jota. I think he could still be an option, squad option, but I wouldn't be massively shocked if he did. But certainly I think Kelleher will go, and I think these are the last few months for Nunes. And Diaz is a bit of an interesting one as well.
this is what we come back to a concern about basically getting rid of everyone. You know what I mean? A team that looks odds on to win a league title and all of a sudden is going to get completely dismantled. So a lot of those players, I think, potentially could leave, but I certainly don't think they all will leave. But I do think there's a question mark over Diaz, particularly if a suitable replacement can come in. Gomez will be down to sort of whether he wants to, do another section as a first team regular, or whether he's happy to continue in the capacity in which he's ably performed for Liverpool over many, many years. Endo, you never hear a word of complaint out of.
Seems pointless trying to get rid of him unless he wants to go.
Yeah, but
he's got a World Cup here as well now that they qualified. Although he knows he'll always be playing for Japan anyway.
Yeah, it's that's a tricky one. As you say, it's just down to whether he's satisfied with the role he has within the team. Can't see that increasing, really.
I'll throw a few other names. Should have really done it this way around, to be honest. Kanate?
No.
No.
So do you reckon he'll sign a new deal?
Yeah.
Simicast?
Yes, I think Simicast will go, yeah. I actually think Liverpool will go in for Milos Kerkez now.
Yeah, so do I, actually, yeah. We did Trent, we did Endo, we did Mo. Harvey Elliott is an interesting one.
That is an interesting one, yeah.
Say somebody comes in with £40 million.
Yeah, I think he'll go.
Say nobody comes in with £40 million.
I think he'll stay.
Interesting one, isn't it? He said a couple of times, he said it to us after the Brentford game, that it's his club and essentially he would be staying, but just wonder how much the lack of opportunities have frustrated him. He's already gone knocking on Slot's door months ago, didn't he? And sort of asking what's the situation in a non-confrontational way. Yeah, interesting one. I think he'll stay.
Tyler Morton?
Yeah, he'll go.
He's been unlucky, hasn't he, this year? Tyler's a good player, I think. And
good Wirral lad.
Yeah, he's got injuries at the wrong time when he would have been playing.
Had loads of interest last summer.
Yeah, so he won. And we haven't mentioned him at all once. Federico Chiesa. We also can't pronounce his name properly. Federico Chiesa. I'd be minded to keep him. If he doesn't want to go, I'd keep him.
Yeah. Well, if Salah goes, he does play the same position, so you wouldn't rush him out the door, would you?
Exactly.
No, that's true.
I think it's very much undecided with someone like that.
Again, that's one where if someone from Italy comes in and says there's 20 million, and you've got somebody else you can line up,
100%.
like Semenyo at Bournemouth or someone like that.
Just to play devil's advocate, then I think he'll go. He's only played 25 minutes of Premier League football, and we're getting into April.
Fair enough.
It's fair. Yeah, I think it's fair.
I won't ask for your team lineups because there's not a game for another 6 years. That should do us.
Mamardashvili, starting goal.
If you are listening to us on YouTube, or watching us on YouTube as well, press the bell, as Joe Rimmer likes to say. Joe Rimmer, who used to be the host of this, doesn't really do it very often anymore, does he? What's he doing today?
There's not much on, has he?
No, he's not
aside
doing
from
anything,
moving house.
I mean, come on, we mentioned that before. It's far more stressful doing this podcast than moving house.
Yeah, there's no stress involved in moving house at all.
Exactly,
yeah. Everything always goes smoothly.
Exactly, yeah. Rate us if you can, please. 4 and 5s. Certainly 5s for this one. threes and fours for when Joe's
This has
doing
been
it, to be honest.
outstanding. This.
I wouldn't go that
Very
far.
good, yeah.
I would.
Would you really?
I thought Rich's answer to Barry was superb.
I thought that was
really.
good there. I
It was
like
a
the
highlight.
interaction, yeah. We're making it more of a personable podcast. That's what it should be. The Blood
Personal,
Personal podcast.
That's directed
Re-
to
rebrand.
yeah.
Anyway, right, bye.